In 2005, Celtic were making a concerted effort to expand their brand into new, untapped and potentially highly lucrative markets. The limit of how much revenue could be generated from their fan base in the British Isles had been reached. In the words of Celtic Chief Executive Peter Lawwell, for too long, Scotland and Ireland have been our mainstays, and the fans have been fantastic, but there's a limit to that. We can't keep coming back to that, and we have to look at different markets. On the 29th of January, the club took their first foray into East Asia and signed Japanese attacking midfielder Shinsuke Nakamura from Serie A side Regina for £2.5 million. Naka was a superstar in his homeland, one of the most popular Asian sportsmen, and in an instant Celtic had gained access to millions of potential new Celtic fans to buy Nakamura jerseys, watch matches on J Sports and sell out stadiums on pre-season tours. Having caught just a small glimpse of the huge commercial benefits to be gained from getting a foot in the door in these emerging football markets, Celtic tried next to crack China. The seemingly perfect player had been identified. Centre-back Du Wei was a rising star of Chinese football. He burst onto the scene.
Did you burst onto the scene? Very few defenders burst onto the scene.
At the age of 19, when he captained China's under-20s to the last 16 of the Under-20 World Cup in 2001. They were beaten 2-1 by Argentina. That same year though, China actually beat La Albiceleste's under-20s 3-1 in a friendly, and Du Wei's performance drew some glowing praise from Diego Maradona. Du Wei has the perfect sense of how defending should be played. His speed is unparalleled. His breakout year ended on a high when he was recognised as the Asian Youth Player of the Year by the AFC. Celtic's scouting network had identified Du, who played his club football for Shanghai Shenhua, with whom he won the last ever Chinese A-League title, as a player with high potential, and on the 2nd of August he began a trial with the Glasgow Giants. Gordon Strachan liked what he saw on Du's first day, but admitted he needed more time to assess him, as he told Celtic's official website. He did well. There was a smile on his face, his English was good, and I think he enjoyed himself, but I have no idea whether he'll be staying any longer. I don't think you'd like me to judge you, as a journalist, on just one of your articles. So Strachan ran the rule over Du Wei before a 4-year deal was agreed in the last days of the transfer window, with the fee reported to be around $800k. But the Du Wei deal was slightly strange. A kind of try before you buy clause had been inserted, giving Celtic up until January to opt out of the deal and send the defender back to Shenhua if they felt he wasn't good enough. The reason for such caution was for one crucial difference between Du Wei and Nakamura. Naka had arrived at Celtic from Regina, where he had been playing for 3 years in the Serie A. He'd had plenty of time to get used to the radically different style of football in Europe, which was much quicker and more physical. He was also an experienced international campaigner, with over 40 caps to his name. Du, on the other hand, had only tasted the significantly softer and slower football of the Chinese top flight, as well as gathering only a handful of caps for his country. So, Celtic took out this insurance of essentially having Du Wei on loan for 4 months to see if he would be able to withstand the rigours of Scottish football. The main worry with the defender was his physicality and strength. As Strachan said, "That would be my only concern at the moment. How he'll cope with the frantic nature of the league here, and the physical knocks that he'll have to take. Not that he's a coward, far from it. It's just that he won't have experienced anything remotely like the football here playing in China. But if he can get used to the style of football here, I think we'll have a player on our hands." In an attempt to bring Du Wei up to speed, he was put into the reserves and played a couple of games in September against Hibs and Aberdeen. All the while, Nakamura was proving to be something of a revelation on the pitch and quickly became a fan favourite. Hopes were high that Du Wei could go on to have a similar impact. Strachan apparently liked what he'd seen, and at the end of October was gushing with praise. Du Wei is a joy. He's always got a smile on his face. He's a joy and a radiator. He radiates when he walks onto the training field. Some are drainers and some are radiators, and he is definitely a radiator. He looks more like a Celtic player all the time, so that's a good thing. He is not far away. What he's doing is more than enough to play in quite a few sides, I'd imagine, and Strachan was in real need of defensive backup. His backline had been shaky and come under serious scrutiny since the very start of the season, when they shipped 5 goals against Artmedia Bratislava in a Champions League qualifier and 4 against Motherwell 3 days later. Although results improved considerably after that, the team were still conceding too many needless goals. Strachan was more or less forced into fielding a centre-back pairing of veteran Bobo Baldi and the inexperienced Stephen McManus, who had only played 7 league games across the 2 seasons prior to the 05-06 campaign. Strachan was a big fan of McManus, but he would not have played Bobo given the choice. And so, with the time running out for Du Wei to prove his worth, he was named in the matchday squad for 4 consecutive games in December. Undoubtedly, the plan was to give him some minutes in several of these games. However, every one of those matches was tricky. tricky, and the team either had to come from behind and pull off an epic comeback, sneak a late winner, or cling on to a draw. Not at all suitable environments for Du to make his debut. With less than a week remaining before the 4-year deal became binding, an apparently perfect opportunity presented itself. With Bobo Baldé away at the Africa Cup of Nations, the Scottish Cup third round tie against First Division side Clyde was an easy enough match to give Du Wei his debut. At least it should have been on paper, but in reality, Clyde were no pushovers, as they had showed in the third round of the League Cup, where Rangers needed extra time to see them off. Also, in normal circumstances, this was a game that would have received a very modest television audience, but it just so happened that on that frosty January Sunday, this was set to be one of the most watched matches in the world. The player who had been described as the greatest signing in Celtic's history was set to make his debut at Broadwood Stadium. For over a decade, Roy Keane had been one of the very best midfielders in the world, scooping up title after title under Sir Alex Ferguson as captain of Manchester United. A bona fide football superstar, Keane had left United under a cloud, and despite having offers on the table from the likes of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, decided to move to Glasgow and play for the club he had supported as a child. And he was to take the field with Celtic for the first time at Clyde's 8,000 capacity ground. Broadcast on Sky Sports, tens of millions were expected to tune in and take in what was predicted to be a comfortable Celtic victory. Only Clyde hadn't read the script. From the get-go, Celtic looked shaky, nervy and not themselves. McManus was getting himself into bother and taking fresh air kicks at the back. Nakamura was misplacing his passes. Paul Telfer was letting the ball roll under his feet. And the game, which was unfolding at breakneck speed, was passing Keno by. But what of the other debutant Du Wei? Well, after making a couple of decent early clearances, the more you watched the defender, the more it became apparent that he was raw, extremely raw, leaping into every header with all his limbs and chasing exuberantly after the ball. He did not exactly instill a sense of confidence. To be fair to him, he looked tidy enough on the ball and did play some neat passes. However, after 15 minutes, everything fell apart. Out of position and ball watching, Du Wei was caught out by a simple ball over the top. Indecisive, he failed to deal with it, and racing to get back, he was out-muscled by Tom Brighton, who slotted it past Artur Boric. Du was let off the hook though, when the goal was, wrongly, chalked off, as Brighton was adjudged to have fouled Wei, when it was actually a fair use of his strength. It was a warning sign for Celtic, one they did not heed. Buoyed by how easily Du Wei had crumpled after being brushed aside, Clyde ruthlessly targeted the defender, who would go on to spend a considerable amount of the rest of the first half on the floor. With the pitch starting to cut up in the freezing conditions, Celtic looked rattled. After 27 minutes, Clyde had the ball in the back of the net again, and once again it was mistakenly ruled out, this time for offside. In the scramble before the goal was scored, Du Wei did not exactly cover himself in glory. And then, finally, on the hour mark, Clyde scored a goal that was allowed to stand. A great ball in was met at the far post by the head of Bryson. Then, 2 minutes later, Du Wei was again bested by his nemesis Tom Brighton. McManus failed to deal with the ball in, leaving Du the wrong side of Brighton and scrambling. Panicking, he tugged the striker's shirt. Penalty. Boric spared Du Wei's blushes by brilliantly saving the spot kick. But it was all to be for naught, as Malone volleyed in from the corner. Du Wei was hanging on for dear life and begging for the half-time whistle. So poor had he been that Strachan was prepping Adam Virgo to come on with 7 minutes remaining. Du remained on the pitch though, and thankfully Celtic managed to get to half-time without any further catastrophes, and could count themselves lucky to be trudging to the dressing room only 2 down. It could and should have been 4 or 5. Du Wei was clearly completely out of his depth and was hooked at half-time for Virgo. In the second half, Zurawski scraped one back, but it was only consolation on what had been a miserable day, as the holders were dumped out of the Scottish Cup at the first hurdle.
Celtic were awful today, absolutely awful.
All credit to Clyde, who with an average age of just 21 had outfought and outthought Celtic. In the aftermath, Strachan was keen to stress that none of the defence had played well. Some of the crueler journalists remarked that Du Wei looked like he had never played football before. Much later, Adam Virgo would claim that he was meant to start the game, but the powers that be had ordered Strachan to play Du Wei, as they would rake in TV money from China, a claim that Celtic strenuously denied. Strachan asked Shenhua for more time to evaluate Du, but the club refused, and so the defender was unceremoniously shipped back to China after managing only 45 minutes for the first team. The whole Du Wei debacle proved that commercial success relied upon finding the right player. You could not just pluck any random footballer footballer from Asia and expect jerseys to fly off the shelf. As Celtic's commercial director at the time, David Thompson, explained, there were loads of commercial deals set up for Douay, but at the end of the day, if he's not good enough to play regularly in the first team, then the deals are worthless. It was a real disappointment.
Big Douay, man. I couldn't believe he played Douay in that game because
Was he horrendous in training in that?
Nah, in fact, see in training he could play, but see defensively wise, like boys getting up against him and that, and big. It was big. Remember Big Alec Williams?
So I see it right after the
Flung
game.
him about, man. Big Douay was never seen again, mate.
No wonder.
Never seen again. I don't know where they put him, mate, but we never seen him again after that game.
Do one.